everyone, Rabbi Yoni Dahlen here. We have another opportunity to do a little learning together. So this is part of our series of Shabbat at Home How-To videos. So far we've covered Kiddush, we've covered Neirot, or the lighting of candles, and tonight we're going to talk about Motzi. We're going to talk about the blessing that we say over bread. So at this point, we've lit candles, we've gone to synagogue, we've come home, we've said Kiddush, all of our friends and all of our family are around, we've made that blessing together. We have just washed our hands because we wash our hands to do Natilat Yadayim every time that we have bread at a meal. And because we're having challah or any type of bread for our Shabbat dinner or lunch, then we need to say Natilat Yadayim and wash our hands ceremoniously. So one of the things that you'll see in a lot of different homes is after doing Natilat Yadayim, after the hand washing, people won't speak at all. There's a deeper and longer reason for this, but basically, to describe it very quickly, we don't make any kind of interruptions between one blessing to the next blessing. The blessing of washing our hands is directly connected to the blessing that we are going to say over bread. So immediately after washing our hands and saying the blessing of Natilat Yadayim, no one speaks, no one says a word, until we say the blessing over bread. So it's a good opportunity to sing a nigun or to hum along a little bit. You don't need to sit in silence, but we just avoid some chit-chat or small talk at this point. So after that, we get back to the table. We are going to need a few different things to be able to say Motzi. First, we keep our bread covered, whether we're having challah or pitot or whatever our bread is, we keep them covered throughout the blessing until we are ready to say Motzi. We're going to need 2 pieces of bread. It does not have to be challah, traditional challah, braided bread. Here we're going to use a little pretzel rolls. It's nice to have some kind of challah plate or some kind of ritualized plate to put your challah on or your bread on. And you're going to need salt. And the reason that we say Motzi, and the reason that we do it the way we do, is you'll hear a lot of different drashes or a lot of different reasoning, but essentially the rabbis tell us that after the destruction of the Second Temple, when we no longer have the temple, when we no longer have temple services, the Jewish home and especially the Jewish table becomes the new altar. So what we're doing when we say Motzi is we are symbolically representing the sacrifice that used to be presented every Shabbat. So it says that there is shnei kvasim, that there were 2 different sheep offerings that were given each Shabbat. Instead of having those ritual sacrifices, we now have 2 pieces of bread. And we'll see that when we do the Motzi, when we do the blessing that we're going to go through, there are different ceremonies that recreate that temple offering, using a knife, using some salt, all these things that turn our table into an altar. Okay, so let's get into the blessing itself. When we say the blessing, we're going to pick up the pieces of bread that we have. We're going to hold them together. You can put the salt on before or after we say the blessing. Again, the salt is reminiscent of the salt that the Kohanim, that the priests used to put on the offerings at the temple service. So the reason that we put salt on the bread is, some people will say it's because even when we have the sweetness of Shabbat, we still remember the bitterness of the destruction of the Second Temple. It's not incorrect, but it's about half the story, because the bitterness of not having the temple is drawn directly to the fact that since we don't have offerings anymore, korbanot, we are doing offerings in our home and we are recreating that offering. So the salt that we're putting on is the same type of salt offering that would have been put on the meat that would have been offered at the temple. So when we put these 2 pieces of bread together, there are 2 different ways of saying this blessing. Essentially, the only thing you need to do to say Motzi is to say the bracha over bread itself. So Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz. That blessing means, blessed are you, O God, who brings forth the bread from the earth. Now there are different traditions of things to say beforehand. Some people bring a tune to kind of get the festivities of the blessing we're about to say, which goes like this. We give thanks to God for bread. Our voices rise in song together as our joyful prayer is said. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Everyone else responds, Amen. And then you take apart the pieces of bread and hand it out. Sephardim and Mizrahim, people who come from Middle Eastern countries or Spain and Portugal descent, have the tradition of adding a line beforehand. We do it in our house as well, where we say, Potech et yedecha umasbia lechol charatzon, and then go into the blessing, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz. This is again a blessing talking about God opening God's hands and giving food and sustenance to all of God's creatures. So after whoever is blessing the bread says the blessing with the bread together. After the blessing is said, we put on some salt, again, reminiscent of the temple sacrifice. If you are celebrating the year of your wedding, so immediately following your wedding and Sheva Brachot and going into the year up until your anniversary, there is a tradition of using honey instead of salt, which is to symbolize the sweetness of new life together. So we say the blessing, we put on the salt or the honey. Some people have the tradition of before saying the blessing or before handing out the bread to ceremoniously shecht or cut the bread, just like you would shecht or cut the animal that used to be offered in the temple service. It has been taken on by a lot of mystics to have a kind of a mystical connotation as well, but you'll see it at some people's tables. After you say the blessing, after the salt and the honey, or the honey, is applied, and you hand out the bread, whoever says the blessing should eat the bread first, and then to hand out the bread to everyone else at the table. As soon as you have eaten the bread, as soon as you have had a piece of bread, you are supposed to have a kazayit's worth of bread. So a piece of bread that is at least the size of an olive. And once you have had your piece of bread, then you can start speaking again. Some people wait till everyone's had, but most people wait until they've had themselves, and then they can start talking. So again, when we are celebrating Shabbat, and we are doing these different rituals, part of it is for our own good, so that we can slow down and be mindful of the meal that we're about to eat. Part of it is a little bit of pageantry, right? We're recreating the temple service, or at least part of the temple service and what it used to look like, but we're bringing it into our homes. But the idea of physical ritual is really important, especially for children, because even though sitting around the table, talking and laughing and singing is nice, there needs to be a demarcation that makes this night, kind of like in Pesach, different from all other nights. On Shabbat, things feel a little bit different, and we want to embrace the fact that it feels different, because that difference should be a difference of joy and blessing. It should feel good. It should feel different than all of our other meals do. So if there are any questions, again, please let me know. If you have any other ideas of things that you want to see in these videos, please let me know that as well. So we'll just go through it one more time really quickly. After we have washed our hands, we come back to the table, take the challah cover off. We're not speaking. Whoever is doing the blessing raises the bread. You can either sing the song or say the bracha by itself. Potech et yedecha umasbia lechol charatzon, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Everyone says Amen. Whoever made the blessing eats the piece of bread, passes it out with salt or with honey, and as soon as everyone has had their bread, then you're allowed to speak, and then you can continue your meal. All right, thank you, everyone. Again, if you have any questions, let me know. Hope everyone has a beautiful, beautiful Shabbat. Shabbat Challah.
Sometimes you need to go